So I basically I got started in the world of entertainment. Basically, I grew up in the entertainment business,
Okay.
singing since I was a little kid and doing all that fun, just being on the stage. And I was able to take that aspect of it. And my grandmother's an artist; she's amazing at it. So be able to take like the music side plus the artistry side, and you marry those together into basically what becomes an editing slash VFX. That's where my specialty is. Yeah, so I got started editing in probably filming and editing probably around 2010. I was a full-time musician prior to that.
Oh, what instrument did you play?
What instrument? So I play guitar, piano, bass. I do play the ukulele as well, and I
Okay.
sing. I was actually the front man for the band,
Okay.
and we toured full time for we toured for about 4 years, and then full time for 2 years. Um, and I got started basically making tour videos while we were, while we were traveling and stuff like that, and we were a Christian rock band,
Okay.
and so one of the ways that we were able to make some steady income as a band were we were the house band for a youth group um, in DFW. So
In DFW, is that a festival?
no, DFW is Dallas Fort Worth. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
I feel like everybody in Dallas would know what that is. Like every time we say DFW, but like the people who aren't from Dallas, they don't know. But no, DFW is the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. So yeah, we did a little bit of in-house music there, and what was cool was the youth pastor at the time. He bought a camera, like an old Canon 7D, 24-70 lens, and we were into this channel, and he doesn't really do a whole lot anymore. But Julian Smith, do you ever watch Julian Smith's videos?
Sounds familiar. That name
Yeah,
sounds familiar.
he would always do like these little silly comedy shorts on YouTube. And so we were watching him and we really got into him.
Okay.
And the youth pastor had this camera and he handed it to me and goes, "Hey man, you think you can make some of these for the youth?" And, because I think they would love it. I think it would be funny, if you guys were the stars in it and all this stuff. And so that's kind of how I started doing like a little bit more like narrative stuff. We'd sit there, we'd write a script,
Oh, I see. Okay.
and then we'd do the dumbest videos you could possibly imagine. And they were terrible. I mean, they weren't great at all. I would suggest going and looking them up. But
Do you still have them?
they're probably in the world of YouTube somewhere, just
Oh, really?
buried. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's basically how I got set, and kind of got a passion for it, more so than just like doing a blog video. I'm actually able to tell a story with a camera and a lens, and just kind of developed a passion for that side of things. And then from there, I was able to, from that same church, there was a lady there that by the name of Ann Byer. She's an up and coming actress. She's doing really, really well right now. She's in LA.
Okay.
But before she moved to LA, she was in Dallas and went to church with me. And I was doing her photos I was doing her headshots. And she asked me one day, she goes, "Jeff, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Man, I would really love to direct films." And she said, "Well, then let's do something." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure." She was like, "There's this festival. It's called the 168 Film Festival. You get 168 hours to make a film, and it was Christian based." And so I was like, "Yeah, you know what? I've never done this before, but let's give it a shot." And I just put the word out there and made a connection with a bunch of local film guys that I'd never known before. And I did my first film, directed it, and I had DPs on set and all this stuff, and it was a short film. It came out to 11 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that.
Okay.
And I really loved it. We went out to LA, and we ended up winning the whole thing,
Okay.
which was really crazy. We won best editing, best director, and best film. And I think just from there, I kind of caught the bug, and just wanted to continue to make movies, and you asked me how I got hooked up with Brett.
Yeah.
It was, I had done a handful of short films, and everybody who's ever done short films, their end goal is to do features. And I was looking at Brett, he just finished 90 Feet from Home. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to be on that one. I was working on another project at that time, which was called Sunny Vicious, which is another short film that's doing pretty well. You can find some of their materials online, but directed by my buddy Joseph Spector. He's a pretty good up and coming director here in Dallas as well.
Okay.
So I was working on that when he was doing 90 Feet from Home. But everybody who's working on short films, their aspiration is to do a feature film. And so I just sent a message out to Brett one day and was like, "Hey man, if you ever need an editor, let me know. I'd love to work on a feature someday." Just random out there. And he messaged me right back and goes, yeah, cool. I'll save your information in case anything ever pops up. Well, they started putting everything together for Copper Bill. And, Copper Bill it's got Tom Hallam. It's got
Dusty Rhodes.
Dustin Rhodes. Yeah. Not Dusty Rhodes, Dustin Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes.
Dustin Rhodes. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
And so Brett contacted me and was like, "Hey man, I got this movie. It's a low budget movie. But I don't have an editor. Do you want to edit?" And I was like, "Man, I would love to." And I took this project on, never editing a feature before. And I'll be honest with you, all I had was a laptop, a 2016 Mac Pro. And I'm trying to edit this movie on this laptop. And every time I export a cut of it to give it over to Brett, it literally takes 12 hours to export this thing. And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, this is crazy." So I got thrown into the world, but I think you kind of have to do that, right? If you want to, if you want to, do something in life, you have to just go and do it. And even if you feel like you're not prepared for it, eventually you'll get yourself prepared for it, to where now, I'm editing on this huge, edit station, and I'm constantly building my gear and building up to being able to edit on bigger projects and stuff. So that's basically a shortened version of my road to working in films.
So you've obviously developed a set of material and also what's the word, equipment I meant to say, for your editing studio. So do you have that studio at your home, or do you have a separate location for where you do all that work?
Right now I have it at my home. Eventually I'll have a studio space, but for now I'm just a one-man show. So I have basically commandeered one of the rooms in our house, and it's where all my camera gear and all that stuff lives. And I've got 2 kids, and I'm married, so my kids like to bombard the office every now and then. But it's fun with my wife. She doesn't work, so she's a stay-at-home mom, which is great because my son is 2, and then my daughter, she is just a few months old. And so being home in those integral moments, I think, is important. And so with me being able to work at home as well, it allows me to kind of lend that extra hand whenever she needs it.
That's nice. That's a nice position to be in. So, but I'm curious now though, working with Brett though, I would imagine that when you were working with him, considering the schedule that he has, is he turning in the footage over to you as production goes on, or once it's completed and then he says, "All right, here's everything, have at it"? Like, how does that work out between the two of you to get that set up for you guys to be able to figure out what works for you guys to get everything put together in its final form?
For sure. As an editor, so basically how the process works is you would typically have a DIT on set, which is a data wrangler, the person who's taking the card from the DP, putting it in, to the computer, into the hard drive, organizing it, ingesting it. And I always suggest to organize and ingest by day shot and by card. And then everything, all the sub data information from the camera is actually super important. It tells you which roll you shot on. So like if you ever look at a slate, right? There's all these little numbers and things on there. Everything correlates with what is happening in the data file. So like you've got your roll number, and then the data file should also have a roll number, and they should match, right? And everything should line right up. And so basically with Brett, a lot of times I'll show up on set, especially on the last day,
Okay.
just to go and be with the crew um, and all that stuff. But a lot of times with Brett, you know, with being such a micro budget film, uh, we have to wear a lot of hats. And so a lot of times Brett will just organize the footage for me and just dump it on and hand it off to me, and I'll take it from there. And we obviously make duplicate hard drives and things like that in case, something crashes. And that actually happened on one of our films where the hard drive crashed, and thank goodness we had backup, because we had to transfer everything over to this,
Which
you
one was
know,
that for that you
uh,
had that crash?
Operation Overlord.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I plug it in, and I think it was like I was a day or two into editing it, and then all of a sudden it just didn't want to work anymore, and I was like, oh
Hmm.
no, let me call Brett. I hope we got this backup ready. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah, definitely. You work on enough projects, you're gonna see some stuff like that. So
Interesting. So now explain to me then, when as you're editing the film for Brett, and then you're working from where you had started off on kind of on your own, and then working along with him, do you are you putting in your own input as far as like, okay, I think this will work well here, and combining the shots together, splicing it up like this, or does Brett already have it in mind? Okay, I want you to do it like this, and then follow this formula, and then he'll probably ask for your advice along the way. How does that work out between the two of you as far as that relationship is concerned?
yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, different editors are different. Brett
Right.
is fun to work with because he's very hands off when it comes to that. Um,
Mm,
I have a theory when it comes to filmmaking. Every film is told three different ways before it ever gets to the viewer. The first time it's told in the writing room with the script writer. The second time it's told on set with the DP who visualizes it, visualizes everything. And then the third time it's told through the editor's eyes, who basically puts all the pieces together. And I think if you allow the freedom of the editor to interpret the story from the pieces and the elements that he gets, a lot of times, as long as you're not pushing against like the purpose of the story, like if you're doing stuff that's distracting, too many cuts, like you're not serving the story's purpose, a good editor can interpret the footage and the elements to tell a story that not only is what the director wants, but also might enhance what the director originally had in mind. And so if you allow that freedom to happen in post-production, you could come across with something that's really great.
So are you so it sounds like to me you have like pretty much full free reign to not necessarily do what you want, but to kind of take your with what you know, and have them to put everything together. And then when you present it to Brett, at least let's say like the first time around, you had put everything together, showed it to Brett. Was his reaction like, "Wow, that's actually pretty good," but do this instead of that, or was it like, "That's perfect, we'll leave it like that"? Like, what was that first interaction on the first cut?
Yeah, generally we'll go through a few different rounds of edits. And because I've done, and how many have I done with Brett? I think it's like 8 now,
Yeah, I
something
think
like
so.
that.
Yeah.
Um, I start to develop and learn his style of storytelling. And so, at the end of the day, we've got to service the story. That's the most important thing. We're telling a story. But so like when I sent it over to Brett, there was one, I believe it was a Rodeo Thief, where there was a lot of back and forth dialogue in the prison sequence. And
Mhm.
I just wanted to, I was cutting over here and then cutting over here and then cutting over here and then cutting over here, because the way that we shot it, if you've seen the Rodeo Thief, there's like in the prison, there's a glass wall there
Yeah.
between the two characters, and one shot the mic is on that side of the room, and the other shot the mic is on this on this side of the room. So it's like the audio that I chose to use was correlating with that. But when I sent over the cut, Brett was like, this is so distracting. Like they're just cut, 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 cut. Can we
Mm.
figure out some way to like stay on the girl for just a few more measures and stuff? And so we had to get a little creative when it came to the audio in that regard. But yeah, sometimes he'll give me notes like that.
Okay.
Or sometimes, he won't like a certain take from an actor. So we'll go back and find a better one. Like maybe their eyes just weren't quite selling the story, or maybe maybe they flubbed the line, and they said something a little bit different, and Brett didn't like that. Yeah, so yeah, there's always moments like that, but for the most part, yeah, we do a really good job of being able to put the story out within
Yeah,
just a couple
and you know
rounds of
what?
edits.
It's funny because you're talking about Rodeo Thief here. So with that movie, one of the, well, actually, I'm going to back a little bit here. So Brett, I know, have seen his films on numerous occasions now. He's he for me, he's known for taking a lot, letting the scene kind of play itself out, just taking long takes and just not have too many cuts in between.
Mm.
So when you're talking with him prior to, well, actually, when he reached out to you and said, "Hey, I got a project I'm going to work on here that I'm working on right now. I need an editor. Would you be interested?" Of course, you jumped in on that. But was there any sort of stipulation about, listen, the way I like to have my shots set up, long takes. I like to have it like this, just so that you're aware of that. Or did you have a feeling for what he likes to go for from what you watched in his previous movies and then get an idea? Okay, he likes this type of flow of story where not too many cuts. Did you figure that out for yourself already, or was that discussed ahead of time too?
No, I think it's just something that we just kind of developed together.
Okay.
I love long takes. I'm a
Okay.
huge fan. Like I'm also a cinematographer, and with the Bull Shark movie coming out, I was the DP on that project.
Okay.
So I am a huge fan of the one take. And if you can have a scene that's like, if you can tell the story with a camera, one take from start to finish, um, it requires a lot of choreography on set. It
Right.
requires that your actors basically have to stay in the moment through the duration of the scene, which is like 5 minutes. So it showcases literally everything. It showcases the quality of the actors, the quality of the crew on set, and it showcases basically the quality of the film, I believe, because it's like you planned it that way.
Right.
That's what you anticipated. And so the longer takes, I love them. If you've watched Outlaws Buckle, have you seen that
I've seen
one?
that movie. Yeah, I think I saw it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw it once, but I've seen that film. Yeah.
we did a few of really long takes. Anthony Gutierrez is he's a steady cam operator.
Mhm.
So, and he does like a lot of stuff for network television and things like that. So coming on set, he was able to bring his steady cam and make these amazing long
Yeah.
tracking
Yeah.
shots
Yeah.
that you don't uh, it's crazy. Like if you don't notice it, like if you don't notice how long that shot is, then you're doing your job. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you're
Right.
just into it through the duration of the shot. I think there was a shot, it was on True Detective, and I think it was one of the longest tracking shots, where the guy, like, literally Matthew McConaughey, uh, it follows him, but it's like a bunch of other stuff going on. It's like this
Yeah.
street war going on or whatever. And I can't remember how long that tracking shot, but things like that, I think it really showcases the ability of the filmmakers more so than just cut, 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 cut. Oh, we got this shot. Now let's cut it. Let's go over here. We got this shot. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a huge fan of them
That's like
for
the
sure.
I think the West Wing too. They were notorious for doing stuff like that, especially for network
Yeah.
television, where just like they were heavy dialogue all the way through from not just one person, but like the security. I'm sorry, the Secret Service, and then the reporters and everyone's chiming in. Like you don't think about, at least at the time I didn't think about, but that's, upon learning how difficult that stuff can be put together. I think a lot of people take it for granted, not knowing the amount of work that's involved with that here. So, but so you mentioned before that you're the DP over for the film Bull Shark. That wasn't even a movie, right? Bull Shark, because I know it was a different name beforehand, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it was Blood in the Water. I
that's what it
think,
was. Yeah.
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it had something to do with, like, because ITN, they do really well overseas, and um, Blood in the Water, like, had some kind of bad stipulation with one of the countries that we're trying to sell it with, so they really wanted to
Uh,
go with Bull Shark. And yeah, uh, uh, yeah,
well, so with that
little
movie
quick thing.
though, are you also editing that film as well too? Or are you just strictly just doing the just director photography on that side of it?
No, I'm editing it as well.
Okay.
I think the intention was, because this one has a lot more CG.
Hmm.
Brett really wanted me to shoot it because you know, like I have to shoot for how I'm going to put the elements in the scene, put the shark in the scene, put the, the gunshots and all that fun stuff. It's kind of hard to do that. Like if the DP doesn't edit or doesn't do VFX, it's really hard to explain
Mm.
how it needs to be shot so I can properly track the scene to put the elements in it.
So you basically had three jobs at once as a VX with your VXX background editing, and now your DP duties on the set there. So one thing Brett had told me in the conversation we had previously was that for Bull Shark there was everything, he says you guys are pretty good about maintaining a really tight schedule and get everything done within that timeline there. But Bull Shark was one of the very
Yeah.
few times where you had to go beyond that because I think you mentioned, if I remember correctly, that the I guess the CGI of the shark wasn't tracked very well or something to that effect. I'm not sure if
No,
I'm explaining
no,
it correctly.
no, no, no. What it was he was relying on the amount of time that the shark would, basically the amount of screen time that the shark is going to have.
Okay.
Contractually, we have to hit 120 minutes, and
Oh, for that movie?
for basically that's what ITN wants us to get to,
Okay.
our distribution company. So we have to
Okay.
get to a certain amount of time, and a lot of production companies are the same way like that. But the with that one, I was trying to explain to Brett, and this is both, neither one of us have ever done like a movie that has this amount of CG in there. So it's really hard to kind of gauge how much, screen time do we need. But the longer you stay on a CG character, um, the less real it looks. You know what I mean? Like if you look at,
Mm, true.
like, I mean, I'm not Weta Digital or, any of these
All
big,
right.
huge brands or whatever. If you look at like a Marvel movie and like huge chunks of that is done in CG, but then you go to the credits, it's like thousands of people, right, that are
Right.
responsible for that CG. And we just kind of had to make a decision. A lot of the reason why we fell short on that one too was we didn't have a moment in the script where our main character could basically unpack either his history or it's something about his life. We didn't really have that moment. We had a lot of quick action moments and like a lot of because I mean it is an action movie. This
Okay.
basically the premise of it, if you watch the trailer at
Yeah.
all, the premise of it is this game warden is tasked with killing a bull shark that gets caught, that gets loose in a lake. And so there is some room for some to slow it down and for some dialogue moments. And we had to go back and reshoot some of those things. And
Mm.
so we just didn't have them. So we ended up landing about 20 minutes short when we put the whole thing together. And yeah, we needed a little bit more time with some of the characters.
So let me ask you about, when it comes to the story that Brett is coming up here with, are you privy to that stuff ahead of time as far as, hey, I got an idea, this is what I'm going to do? Does he come for you with suggestions about, I'm thinking about doing a shot like this. If you were to edit it, how do you think it's going to come out, with what he's trying to explain to you? Like, do you have that kind of setup as or not setup, like a preparation for what to be expecting as production starts to come together, and then what you're getting in the post production? Like, do you have an idea as far as like what the overall? I mean, apart from Bullshark, which we obviously worked on set, but all the other projects that you weren't on set as much. But do you have an idea as far as what the overall story and the vision that he's trying to go for you to have an idea how you want to go about with the editing process of it?
Yeah, yeah. So Brett is really good about, um, along with the crew agreement, he sends the script first, and so
Okay.
I'll read the script, and if I have any notes, I'll send them back. But I usually don't. Brett's usually really good with all that, and so from there, basically the story just has to develop based on the locations that we get, right? So
Right.
like you can have these grandiose ideas, and I had these grandiose ideas when it came to bull shark. Like I want to do this amazing shot in, down the hallway or here, and I was putting all these ideas together based on a location that didn't quite exist yet. And then when we got to the place, it was like, okay, most of those are going to have to go out the window because it doesn't work for the location that we're shooting at.
Right.
So so yeah, I mean, we do a really good job of doing pre-visualization and trying to put everything together. With Bull Shark, I put together a full shot list,
Okay.
and we spent about 2 or 3 hours just going over that shot list. And he was like, I don't think that shot's going to work. This one's going to be great, and all the, and so you kind of get a visualization of what the movie's going to look like before you shoot. Um, and so that's a lot of the process that we went through.
For you, when you're editing uh on set, in this case over Bullshit, you're DPing on there, and then you're also, and to some degree I would imagine you're also helping out with the VFX as well too, is that right?
Yeah, I'm doing all the VFX for this one. Mhm.
Okay. So having taking on three jobs here at this point and doing all that stuff, is that, does that get a little overwhelming for you personally, about considering the amount of work that you're putting into the film, but also I would imagine that as you're used to doing one thing more often than the other, was it a little difficult to kind of get back into the swing of things where you may have not done it as often as DPing as you were doing editing, and to some degree even VFX? Like, was there a little bit of a balancing act for you to figure out like how to um basically you're trying to figure out how, what's going to be the best way for you to sort yourself out of this here, and picking out what's going to be the main focus? Like, I know you're in DP and you're trying to focus on getting the shot right, but are you still thinking about, but if I get the shot right like this, then I can edit it like that? Like, or are you just solely focus on that aspect of the job and then worry about the other stuff later?
No, I'm always thinking about the edit. I
Okay.
think I think everything comes down to, and even a good DP thinks about the edit, right? Thinks
Mm,
about how this is going to come together. Because like I said, um, the editor is the last hands that touch the film before the viewer gets to see it. So if you shoot knowing the edit in mind, certain things that you got to pick up, like, if the actor picks up a phone off the table, sometimes you may need to grab a tight shot of that, or you need to bump out and get a little bit wider so you don't have to get a tight shot of that, but you can actually see that motion. If she's reaching off screen, she grabs a phone and pulls it out, but the audience never knew that there was a phone on the table or a knife on the table or a gun on the table. You know what I mean? You never established that in your scene. You have to think of that as the DP. How is this going to cut together? So I think even a good writer thinks about how it's going to be edited, with the way that they write their story. Like, how are we going to be able to tell this in such a way that visually, the audience is going to know everything that's in the scene, everything that happens in the scene, and nothing is going to be taken off the frame. Like, you have to be able to put everything in the frame and build the entire world, even if it's just a tiny little room that you're in.
got it. So now for you at this point right now in your stage of career, what would you think would be considered the most difficult part of the job, considering where you've moved on as far as editing, in this case DPing and VFX, and like what's the most tedious part of the work that you, I wouldn't say maybe dislike, but probably, if you could do one over the other, what would be that part of the job that you have a more like a love hate relationship as far as editing, VFXing, and DPing? So what's that for you?
Yeah, so I really do have a passion for VFX.
Okay.
I but it's so, to me it's a lot less stressful now. I could say, like, there are moments, obviously, even in Brett's films, where I go back and look at it, I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? That was just terrible. You know what I mean? But that's the beauty and balance of a micro budget film, that you really got to push out, within, you've got a limited amount of time and you got to push everything out. And I'm one man show, whereas like bigger houses, they get like one or two clips that they work on for 3 months, and they can, make it look perfect. And you have a VFX supervisor, which that second set of eyes to look at it and go, that really looks like crap, or that looks amazing. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And just having all that. But if I focused on one thing, it would be VFX. But I, I value the fact that I know how to do everything. I came from a church background, so when you work at a church,
mhm.
you have to do everything. You're the camera op, you're the audio guy, you're the editor. I mean,
Yeah.
you're you're the animator, you're doing everything from start to finish. And so taking that onto a film set, it's great because knowing how everything works, you're able to basically, you operate like a dance, right? Everybody's able to work together, you know,
Right, right.
perfectly. And then also knowing how to shoot and knowing about audio and knowing about all these things when I take the files into post production, um, I can fully understand why the camera, maybe translated the highlights a certain way that I don't necessarily like, and how do I fix that? And how come the black balance is out? And a lot of people don't think about that when they're on set, but different things like that. When you get
Right.
into post production, understanding the camera, I think is super valuable. So
But you also said you wanted to direct films too. So is that still something you are wanting to pursue, or right now you're content with where you are and taking these? I wouldn't say baby steps, but just taking these steps where you're focusing on one aspect of filmmaking, and then you do another one. Now you're taking another responsibility. So are you kind of just preparing yourself for the overall task of what directing involves here? Considering working with Brett on set, like seeing how that's done for you to figure out what is going to be your way about approaching this here. Like, are you preparing yourself for that, or right now you're just taking your sweet time with it?
no, I'm definitely preparing myself.
Okay.
My goal is to be, a feature film director.
Okay.
Um, that that's where I want to be.
Okay.
I love to be able to tell the story. I actually just directed a short film called Feast. We did it for this local competition here in
Okay.
DFW.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and so we did all right with it. We got second place behind Paris Beasy, who's up. He's another director. He's a funny guy. And it was a horror film festival, and both of us chose to do comedy horrors, and his just turned out to be a little bit more funnier than mine, and I'm okay with that. It was great. Um, uh, but Yeah, no, I love to direct. I would rather direct features than
Right.
short films, and especially not, competition films are fun, but you got your time limits that are usually unrealistic in the real world.
Mhm.
And You have to basically put something together that you have to cut a lot of corners to put something together to make it to the deadline. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, which is great and everything, but my aspiration is to direct feature films for sure.
Well, so Brett was telling me in our conversation that B22 films is he would like for it to be like in a lot of ways like the go-to place for people to make films. And there are scripts, I'm sure he said, I believe he said he's written that he is you know willing to give to other feature filmmakers that want to take on that responsibility and take on that opportunity. With the exception of a few scripts he would rather keep for himself. So it are you guys discussing about that as well too? But hey, I want to get into this here. I want to do a film of this sort. He may pull out a script and say, hey, I got a script like this that may be to your liking. Is anything like that been discussed, or is it more just about we'll get this job done and then we'll talk later? Like how does that work out between the you guys there?
Yeah, no, we've definitely talked about it.
Okay.
And I've tossed around a few, story ideas and things like that. I do have a story in mind that I really want to direct, and it's a little bit more of an action story, which is what our executive producers really like. They sell really well in their markets. So yeah, I have a story idea, but my passion is in drama, like
Okay.
in the like that 90 feet from home style movie where you're telling a story that's just, it's not necessarily an
Grounded.
action story, that's
Yeah.
not necessarily like you're hunting a shark. It's not necessarily like that. It's a little bit more real world, though. I love those types of movies. Those are the types of movies that I watch. And so I think eventually, once everything starts to get going, I would love to be able to um, direct a film like that.
So when with the story you're kind of you're wanting to get off the ground here, you mentioned it's more of more towards the action genre. So is it more like obviously I'm not asking you to reveal some things, but I'm curious about the type of action you're looking for here that I'm sure the distributors prefer. But are you looking at to make it more of like a straightforward, like I guess for like a Scott Adkins type of action film, something of martial arts, or is it more like grounded in reality, where but it's going to be with a slight heightened reality behind the fights? Like, what kind of action are you looking towards to have for this feature that you're looking to get together here?
Yeah, my style is definitely grounded in reality.
Okay.
With the exception of like superhero movies and things like that, I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge Marvel nerd. So, um, with the exception of those, the style of movie that I really enjoy are the ones that are like, could I put myself in this situation? Like, could
Mm,
I be there? Like, and is that like, could that person be me, basically?
okay.
And those are the types of movies that I think they speak to a larger audience, in my opinion. Like, people love those. I'll give you an example. Um, I'm a huge fan of movies based on a true story, just because, there's no more beautiful like storyline than life itself, right?
Mm,
We all have this ability to live out our own story. And one of my favorite movies that I always go to and I always watch is Cinderella Man. And
mm. That's a good movie. Yeah.
just the I like man, just like everything about it, like this guy who had everything and then lost everything, and then Great Depression hits, and he's just there, and working at the docks, and it had to come from basically that to back to the top. And it's like, that's like a metaphor for a lot of people who tried and failed and have another opportunity to try again, right?
Right.
um, that's I'm not going to be a boxer, but to see that story, to watch that story, it motivates me to want to do something great, and I believe like those are the types of movies um that I want to create, you know.
So as far as the actions are concerned, because you're focusing on making it much more grounded reality. So is it going to be more like along the lines like drama with spurts of action, or is it an action narrative with drama infused moments into the film? Because what I'm curious about, and again, I don't want you, I'm not trying to get you to reveal things, but I'm curious to see how your take on the genre is, because I'm whenever someone is taking on a genre, because for me, my favorite genre of all time is the action genre. I love that genre, but I have a lot of gripes with the genre too, where one of my biggest things, and I'm not saying you're going to do this here, but one of my biggest gripes is quick cuts, boom, 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 boom. And I understand why they do it. And it looked like they worked for a while. And there was a point where I did enjoy it, but then after a while, it just became redundant. But for you, like, what's going to be your take on that when it comes to the action aspect of it? Because considering that, the amount of work that's involved to choreograph and then having to get people that can actually pull off the choreography, how are you thinking about that and preparing for the story, and then hopefully to get it to come to fruition? Like, what's your take on that, considering what you know what works and what doesn't work from your perspective?
Right, right. So when it comes to like different types of action, like fighting and stuff like that,
Right.
I'm not a fight choreographer,
Right.
so I wouldn't be the best.
Yeah.
Like, especially if we were to do a micro budget movie, I don't know if we'd be able to bring a fight choreographer in to be able to do a good fight scene. But I am I'm a hunter and I'm a gun nut. So when for those types of action movies, I feel like
Okay, I see what
maybe
you're
it's a
saying.
cop out or whatever, but it's like
Yeah.
that's just going to be easier, right? To me, like,
Yeah.
if like a normal everyday guy, I'm not going to get in a fist fight with somebody. Like, if I was on a bank heist or whatever, hypothetically, I'm not going to punch everybody at the bank to get the money, right? Like, I'm just going
Mm,
to pull out a nine and threaten everybody with it, and that's like, that's how the story develops for me. Like, what would I do in this situation? And
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So that's basically how I try to tell my stories.
I actually like that response because and not that I was expecting you to give me some BS. That's not what I was getting at, but I like that response because to me, that's always this. I always feel like if you don't know, don't do it. And if you don't know, and you can get someone to do it for you to enhance the story, go for it. But considering what you just mentioned right now, I'll be honest with you, I'm actually really intrigued in how are you going to take on that if if that project were to come to fruition. Because considering with what you just mentioned there, I'm actually trusting that you know what's going to work and what doesn't work, and then I'm sure along the way you'll figure out what's actually going to work out once you're on set. Hopefully, when that comes to fruition here. But so when you're thinking about that, are you looking at like, do you have an idea as far as like how you want to go about it, as far as the blocking the shots and setting up the shots and pulling off that part of the choreography? Or like, are you looking at certain films that gives you an idea how you want to approach it, or do you already have it in mind about, no, this is how I want to do it, and I've already got it set up here, knowing where the shots can possibly be taken at. If it doesn't work, I know how to cut corners here, whatever the case may be. Like anything like that's already worked out in your head for that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's probably one of my curses is because I know, like when I'm writing, I'm always thinking about like, all right, how is this going to work? Do we even have the right location for this? Like,
Mm,
and that's probably not the best way, and it usually slows down the process when you're trying to write a script. Um, I have friends who write scripts, and they write with no budget and no location in mind. Like everything is dream scenario. Let's write the script from start to finish. And that's kind of my curse, I think, because I'm like, we can't do that shot. We don't have the equipment for that one. You know what I mean? And then I'll end up like getting into a writer's block trying to get around it, and then just kind of stuck on, page 30 or whatever, And but yeah, that's I always try to think and visualize. So when we did Feast, I had a writer for that one. Um, and even when he gives me the script, I'm always trying to visualize, and I give him feedback. Hey, so I don't think we can do this shot because we don't have this location secure, or this location that we're shooting in just doesn't make sense for that. So let's rewrite it to this. And there's always even stuff like changing on set when it comes to
right.
visualization and stuff like that. Um, but you can get a lot of it, a lot of it previs in, before you even step on the scene. So
Do you actually feel the weighted responsibility of, going through what you've gone through, working on set, editing, all that? Do you, as you're preparing for this and you're thinking about, okay, what am I going to do? Like, do you feel that weight starting to, tack on? That's like, holy crap, this is going to be, it's gonna be a tough job to go through. Because I mean, I'm sure you've seen Brett work and you know what he has to deal with, and him trusting to everyone do their job so he can focus on one aspect of it here. But for you, are you starting to feel a little bit of that weight of responsibility that is going to come with directing? Like, are you starting to get that already creeping in?
um I think it's just something that I've always wanted to do. So it's and when I do direct a short, yes, I feel that way. I'll be
Okay.
honest with you. It's like I want to respect everybody's time. I want to make sure that everybody has a great time when they're on set. Because I mean, you're telling a story, and at the end of the day, you're entertaining. And so, like, if it's not fun on set and people are having a bad time, miserable time, um, it's just not fun. And what we get to do is we get to create fun. We're building worlds. We're telling stories. We're entertaining people, even if it's whether it's on set or it's on a TV screen somewhere. So I think if ever it gets a little too heavy, or if ever it gets a little too, now there are going to be times when it's heavy. I'll give you an
Mm,
example here in a little bit. But if you ever get to a point where nobody, like, they're just not enjoying their time there on set, the movie is going to reflect that. um and whether I think of it like this. So like when I'm doing voiceovers, I always tell the person who's talking, smile when you talk. And they look at me like, what? That doesn't make sense. The camera's not on, it's just a voiceover, but you can hear a smile. It's
mhm.
crazy.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
the same way you can hear a smile, you can visualize whether the crew believes in what you're doing or not. And you
Mhm.
can see it in the way that the camera moves throughout the scenes. You can see it in the way that the audio is captured, and everything is just like, if the crew believes in it and believes in you, then the project that you put on the other side is going to reflect all of that. And I think I think as a director, yeah, you do feel a lot of that weight.
Have you ever felt at any point, let's say, for example, on Bull Shark, where when you guys were shooting, where you were just, I'm not saying that you felt as if I don't want to do this, but more like, man, I just need a break. Where like you're right in the mix of it, and you're, it's a long day. I know Brett had mentioned before that there's like it's a 10-hour day for as far as shooting is concerned, but being in the heat of the moment, like, have you ever felt like, man, I just want to take a 5-minute break right now because this is way too much at this time. Like anything like that comes to mind when having that experience on set?
Yeah, I do remember, like, the one thing about filming a shark movie is half of the movie is shot in the water,
Yeah.
and it's I mean, everything, it's just kind of scary, right? Because you got, like, $20,000 worth of camera gear that's near the water, that one wrong step can fall right in. And
Mm,
then, and if you see any of the behind the scenes photos, you can see a lot of them on Brett's page.
mhm.
But you'll see, like, I have this dome thing for a small mirrorless camera that I had that we shot a lot of the stuff in the water
Think
with.
so, yeah.
But getting, half the stuff we shot on the boat with a red, half the stuff we shot in the water with there, and just those days when we were doing that in and out, in and out, in and out, was an absolute beatdown. And a part of me was like, man, I wish that the first feature that I DP'd wasn't a shark movie. That was the moment where I was like, man, it must be nice to just be on land the entire time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, so
But
what that film though, I mean, when you guys were shooting in the water though, I mean, did you guys, I mean, I know you guys prepare for, but did you guys go check out the location? Okay, so we're gonna shoot in the water, and did you guys go in the water to kind of get a feel for like, okay, so the boat's gonna be over here, we're gonna do this, like it, to kind of get an understanding of like what is the possibilities of what you guys are gonna have to go come across when actually shooting on that location there? Like, was there anything like that you were preparing for in that regard?
yeah, yeah. So Brett had done a lot of scouting, and he did on scouting. He did scouting on a day in which I wasn't able to go, but he sent me a lot of photos for one of the locations. When you watch the movie, it's the location where the son basically goes in, and the dad tries to get him out. The That location, he was able to send. But the great thing about being on a lake and being on a boat is the lake is huge. And if you don't
Mhm.
like a location, well, let's just drive half a mile down the lake, and find a better one. And we filmed on, I believe it was Ray Roberts Lake, and or Lake Ray Roberts. And there's just the character in that lake is really, really cool. So there's not a whole lot of bad angles when you're shooting on a lake like that.
How long were you guys shooting for that film? Because I know you. I mean, every time you guys had, you finished the film, and then you had to do the extra day, the pickup shot. That was kind of like out of the normal schedule. So, how long did it take for you guys to shoot that? Considering the amount of work that's involved having to shoot on water. So, what was the length and time for that production?
So that one, I believe, was 8 days.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 8 days. We actually did really well shooting on water. We came, so the company that we rented the boat from, they we had the budget to do it in one day. That's the beauty of micro budget filmmaking. It's like, here's your budget, let's make a movie. And so not everybody is like, oh, it's a, I want to make a movie. I'm okay with it being like half passion, half paid. But with a boat rental company, we thought initially they were going to give us 8 hours, and they came back and they said, well, actually on weekdays it's a 6 hour rental. And we're like, 6 hours to shoot like the most important parts of the movie?
Mm.
It's going to be a pain. And man, kudos to everybody that was working on set, because we did it. We knocked it out in 6 hours. I think it was, I don't even remember how many pages it was. It was quite a bit in 6 hours. And Tom was brilliant from start to finish. And so Tom is one of those guys where you give him the script, and you give him, and Brett gives him an idea of how he wants to react in this moment, and then he just lets him go. And Tom hits it like in 1 or 2 takes. And usually we
Mm.
do 2 takes for safety. And the safety isn't necessarily on Tom's side. The safety is on the camera operator side. Maybe, like if you blue focus or whatever, but he's so good, man. He
Yeah,
just
yeah.
knocks it out.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of talking with him too. He's a really good guy as well. So let me ask you about your experience being on the set and kind of being hands-on with, seeing the production side of it too. Like, was there something about that process that you kind of picked up along the way? I mean, I understand you. I know you've done your own short films, but to take it to that level hit now, were you learning some things on the way that you probably weren't aware of before, as far as the technical aspect of it, the directing side of it, that you picked up along the way, actually being on set, watching Brett direct and knowing how he handles certain things or certain problems that came along the way that you were like, oh, like, we could have done this. I had no idea we could do that. Like, anything that comes to mind that you can pick up on that may have changed your perspective about how you approach things differently now.
Right, right. So with Bull Shark, the good thing about this one is if this is our eighth film. I can't remember. We've done so many. We did a whole bunch of COVID films. Basically, we
Yeah.
were able to shoot a lot during COVID. Um, I was able to spend a lot of time on set even before doing Bull Shark. So um, I did. I learned a lot about their process and how they keep everything organized, and how everything is just kind of shot. Like Tiffany does an amazing job with organizing
Yeah.
the shoot schedule throughout the day and just keeping everybody aware of, hey, these are the scenes we're going to shoot. This is the amount of time that we really need to shoot it in. So those types of things, like when you're shooting a feature film, you've got anywhere from 45 to 60, like if you're doing a micro budget like what we
Right.
do, anywhere from 45 to 60 scenes that you've got to capture. And so not everything can be shot in order. So you think about everything that we shot on the lake, right? That's not one day in the movie, that's several different days in the movie. So you've got to be able to keep up with the script. You've got to be able to keep up and make sure you capture every single thing that you need, because if we get into post-production and you missed an important dialogue that furthers the plot, it can be a serious issue. And so Tiffany does an amazing job with making sure that we capture everything. Brett does an amazing job with making sure that everything is everything is as it needs to be. And
Right.
so it's just it's comforting to know that, like, that, especially as a DP, to know that, like, I don't have to necessarily pay attention to if we shot like all the little passive scenes or whatever that may be, like, a small chunk of the script, but they're important to get from point A to point B in the movie, right? I don't have to think about all those things. I've just got to think about, okay, I'm shooting this scene.
Right.
How do I make it look the best it can possibly be? And so I think learning that every key crew member on a set has such a vital role, um, that that is definitely like you can't be a one-man shop. You can't. You'll miss stuff, you
Yeah.
know. And I think watching the way that they operate, it's definitely taught me a lot.
So now, when you're going through, this part of the process now, with post production on the films you've worked on, when you look back on them, I know you mentioned before there's sometimes you look like, oh, I could have done this a little bit better, and I know that's very common for everybody, but do you feel confident with yourself now, given the amount of work you've done and the experience you've gained throughout the years, where that with what you've done on set or with what you're going to be getting, that how where you're going to pick up, and exactly what's going to be happening as far as the editing choices that you're going to be making to help the film look good? Or do you still feel like, what, this is something that it's a case by case scenario that I'm going to figure out as we go along? Like, I'm hoping that makes sense with the question here. If you understand where I'm
Mhm.
coming from.
Yeah, I'm really comfortable when it comes to editing. Um, I would say that, like, if I look at my work from even before Copper Bill, when I did these short films and things like that, when I look at that compared to what I'm doing now, it's night and day different.
Okay.
I'm a different editor than what I was when I first started doing films. The first film I did was in 2016. It's called The River. And I'm a different editor. I'm a different filmmaker. I'm a different person from 2016 than what I am now. And my goal is to look at my movies, let's say that was 5 years. So 5 years from now is 2026. I want to go back and look at Bull Shark and go, man, what was I thinking? And the reason why is because if I'm not constantly developing as an editor, as a filmmaker, as a VFX artist, then there's always going to be this level of, man, I could have done this better. I could have made this cut here, or the CG I could spend a little bit more time on it. And I think that's somebody wise always told me is that every art project is never completed, it's just released. Because
Yeah.
you can spin and keep tweaking and polishing and working, but at some point you just got to be like, you know what, I'm gonna send it into the world and move on to the next one. And with workflows and things like that, you get a little bit more efficient with a little bit more experience. I've taken on projects from other directors where they didn't like the way that the edit happened, so they bring it over to me, and then I look at the way that the editor had everything processed, and I'm like, man, that's how I used to do it in 2016. Now when I organize my film, everything is built for efficiency, everything is built for speed, everything is built to basically get into the story as fast as I can, rather than spending so much time trying to find this file or find this take or find that. I really want to get the story in the timeline and then go from there. And maybe in 5 years from now, that workflow will change.
So
But
you don't
for
want to
now,
you don't want to be complacent, basically, is what you're getting at here.
no, I'm constantly learning. I mean, everybody's a YouTube genius these days. And we've got so much, so much available education. Like, why in the world would people not try to learn and get better at their craft,
Yeah. So now going through, the behind the scene aspect of it here, and you preparing to direct a feature film, are you, working with Brett? And because I've asked him before about, distribution and how that works out. And it's a very complicated, it can be a very dark place for a lot of people who have no idea what to be expecting. But you coming from that perspective where you've worked with Brett and understanding how that side of the business works, are you also taking into consideration as well too? Okay, so now that I want to make this movie, I have to think about who can I bring in to bring awareness to it, and I got to think about the budget so that way they know how much they can get back from that. Like, does that also play into that for you as well too, considering what you have seen with Brett and everyone else you've worked with on those films?
Yeah, I've seen, friends of mine who've made, $500,000 movies, and they didn't have any major actors in it, and they never made their money back, and their investors are just like, wow, we made a movie, we spent a ton of money on this, and that's cool. And maybe you can find that investor that doesn't mind writing off that amount of money. But but in my opinion, if you want to continue to make films and you want to continue to make money, at some point, I mean, you want to continue to make money in films, at some point your film has to make money.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's always, luckily with the distribution deal that we got, if you get really efficient at making micro budget movies, you're not going to make a living off of it, but you get to put stuff out there and you get to make movies and you get to tell stories. And I think there's a passion behind that, yeah, I mean, you're always thinking about like, how can this movie sell or whatever, but luckily, with the distribution company that Brett works with over at ITN, they they tell us a little bit about what they need. They need a dinosaur movie, they need a shark movie. That's kind of where we landed on with this one. They were like, man, we really want a shark movie. Walmart has some space for it, so that's what we did. We set out and we're like, you know what, let's figure it out. I'll figure out how to animate. I know how to use Blender. I can make a shark open his mouth and attack a camera. You know what I mean? And yeah, you're always thinking about that. You're always thinking about how this movie can sell. But what's crazy is like you bring up like and you bring up like being able to use actors or whatever that can sell the film. But if you're aware of like the Squid Game effect, right?
Yeah.
Like they had, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, not a single one of those actors even had an agent, right? None of them had a massive deal.
I
They
think
were,
they did because one of as far as I'm aware, two of the actors that I'm aware of are at least in Korea, they're really well established actors. They definitely had agents, but as far as some of the other actors, I think you might be
yeah.
leaning more towards that. But yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, I was just trying to make sure that
Uh,
I remember I heard it.
no, 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 definitely correct me if I'm wrong. But I mean, none of them were known at all in America.
Right,
But the story was so good that everybody bought into it from, from the first few scenes.
right.
And I do believe that there is a market out there for up and coming, really well, not known, but really well polished actors to make a movie that may not have a name attached to it, but is a great movie and can still get viewership. I think it's out there. And I think it's becoming something that, in the next few years will become a little bit more normal. Um,
Well, so
I don't know, like,
where do you get that? Where are you getting that perspective from? And I'm not arguing with you at all about that. But I'm just curious about where does that
right, right.
mindset come from about where you feel like where working with Brett, considering with
Mhm.
the actors he's worked with, there's obviously awareness for Tom Hallam, Billy Blair, Robert Keith, in his movies. But when you're thinking about for yourself in this case, and I like your confidence in that. But I'm curious for yourself, like you believe that there is going to be a market out there for people to trust that the film looks good without having to have a established actor for you to be able to sell the movie. Like where's that vote of confidence coming from you to be able to hope in return get an investor to say, you know what, we love the story, this will sell off of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from the increase of demand that we
Okay.
have. Like, you've got all these streaming platforms that are constantly looking for stuff. And now when I'm thinking of like a Tom Hallam or Billy Blair or whatever, like they're great, but they're in that category that I'm talking about, where I believe you can make a movie with guys who are still up and coming that
Oh, I see
that
what you're
can
saying. Okay,
well
I
versus
gotcha.
like a Leo
Gotcha.
DiCaprio or Tom Hanks or
Gotcha.
whatever.
Gotcha.
Like I feel like you can make a movie with an amazing story. Like Rob, do you ever go to film festivals at all?
No, I've never actually gone to one at all in my life ever.
Okay. Yeah, so there is man, I would challenge you to go. And if you ever have a chance to go to one in LA, there's one called Shriek Fest that happens every year in October. And
Yeah, I've heard of
one
it.
of my films got accepted into that. So my wife and I flew out there, and um, I watched some of the most amazing feature films out of that festival that I've ever seen, that were done on micro budgets, you know, for nothing. And I was like, why aren't these movies in theaters? It didn't
Right.
make any sense to me.
Right.
The stories were original. The characters, like the actors, were amazing. No names. And I'm like, there, with the amount of marketing that you can do right now,
Hmm.
with the amount of distribution through streaming platforms, there are ways in which movies like that, I believe, can get picked up. Like I said, Squid Games in America, nobody knew who those actors were,
Yeah.
but it picked up with the right amount of marketing. You got Netflix, who's basically putting it on a pedestal, saying this is great content. Let's, and I guarantee you, they skew their numbers a certain way to put certain things up to
Yeah.
certain,
Yeah.
up to certain viewership. And something that's done really well at a really high level with actors that we may not be considered A-list actors, but are really, really good. I believe it will have the ability to, to do really well.
So, I do believe you. I really, really do. And I'm always because I'm always in that stance where you can if it's a good story, the film should sell itself. Despite who's in the movie, and I really do believe that. But unfortunately, because the way the industry works, and I think a lot of people who are not aware of it, we're not talking about Hollywood, the mainstream stuff. I'm talking more like independent side of it, where you have
Viewership, yeah.
filmmaker, right? So we have filmmakers who are wanting to make a good movie, but they have no knowledge of the business aspect of it. Where, well, you've got all this, wonderful, you got this wonderful movie, but we can't sell it just off of this alone here because the market's asking for this and this movie's about that. We really can't sell. So it's like a wavelength of like what's hot, what's not, and it's all about what's out there for people that want to see these type of films. So it's a very
Right.
fluctuating business where it's never consistent. So you really just don't know what to sell until it becomes popular. So I agree with you about that, and I think that's how it should be. But unfortunately, that's not how people perceive it to be, and especially those that run it. Which, in my opinion, some ways I think it kind of like manipulates that scenario in my opinion too, from what I've heard. But when you're thinking about you're going through the motions right now and having to put a film together, and you're seeing how the machine works, and you're seeing all the cogs that are putting the pieces together. When you're looking at that now, at this point in your life, do you look at yourself and think, wow, you know what? I think at one point, if I walked into this doing this right now at, around the time that I got started, I may have bit off more than I can chew. So good thing I started off where I was here to eventually get to this level right now for me to see the overall machinery and how this all works out. Because that to me is a huge wake up call. I think for a lot of people who just don't know how this works, but you kind of getting the inside of it, knowing pretty much from an early age here, seeing the levels of success and the failures that comes with that. I would imagine you've seen all aspects of that too, and having that insight, you have an idea about how you would want to go about it, and then the vote of confidence in yourself, and saying that if the story is good, the movie's going to sell, which I think is true. But seeing that now, how are you feeling about where you are with how where you were 10 years ago to where you are with it now, with how this all works out now as far as
Mhm.
movie making is concerned, as far as the business aspect of it is concerned.
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely got a lot more experience for
Right.
sure. I think, I'm trying to think how to say this. I think you have to bite off more than you can chew
Mm,
at some point. If you want to
I
get to
like
the
that
next
answer.
level,
Yeah.
yeah, if you want to get to the next level, you have to understand, all right, there's going to be some late nights. There's going to be there's going to be a lot of, hey, I'm the buck stops with me. I've got to figure it out.
Right.
There's and it also helps to have friends in the industry that you can pick up the phone call and just be like, pick up the phone and just be like, hey, can you help me with this? Like, I'm struggling here. Like, what would you do in this situation? How would you tell this part of the story? Different things like that. But as I said before, with the amount of um, knowledge that is basically built into this amazing library called YouTube,
Yeah.
uh, like we have access to basically do anything that we want to do. Like
Right.
we live in a very unique time right
Yeah, I
now,
agree.
where where people can do and go way further than what they ever thought possible. Like imagine like a film editor not having any formal training, coming from playing in a rock band and all this stuff, and picking up a camera and making a movie. um like imagine that in the 70s and the 80s. It didn't happen, right? That access wasn't available to us because
Mhm.
the film equipment was too expensive, the editing equipment was too expensive. And right now we're in a unique time where you can make a really solid movie on your iPhone. You know what I mean? So um, like I think you have to grow and develop with the technology as it grows and develops. But if you really want to jump into making movies, you just got to make movies. I think like even some of the greatest filmmakers, you know um, JJ Abrams, I follow a lot of his stuff,
Yeah.
and one of his biggest things was you have no excuse to not make the movie you want to make right now.
True.
You don't. The only thing that, like, I believe the only thing that stops people from being able to do that is time. And I had to come to a realization with that, is like, how much time do I want to dedicate to this, and growing my career and being a movie maker, or how much do I want to dedicate to another type of career or something else like that. And I'm blessed to be able to put myself in a position where I'm now making movies on a full-time basis. And that's where I wanted to be when I made my first film in 2016. Um, and even then, as a short film, I bit off more than I could chew. I had no clue how to make it.
Right.
I figured it out. And I think as filmmakers, there's a lot of, you just got to figure it out. You just got to do it. And not all the pieces are going to line up so
Yeah. Yeah.
perfectly
Yeah.
to be able to make it. You're going to come into situations where you're like, what were we thinking when we were on set? You're going to come into situations where not all the puzzle pieces fit exactly like you originally anticipated, but your job, not just as an editor, but as a filmmaker, is to make the puzzle pieces fit. And I think it's important, to like I said, important. It's important to get in a little bit over your head sometimes.
That response you just gave right there, I really do love that. And here's why. Because I mentioned before on more than one occasions, because I think when I was a kid, well, I think it's true. When I was a kid, I was looking at things in a more, glamorizing way, where, Hollywood, if you make into the industry, these things will happen. But the fact that matters is that a lot of filmmakers don't necessarily have um, that door that's available for them to walk through, where they can just make a movie and, have a studio fund it and say, okay, we're going to sell the movie now, it's going to be released in theaters, you'll have X, Y, and Z available. It's a very, very difficult process. And I think that's where it weeds out those who really want to do it and those that don't. And then the thing that I also uh and I lean more towards the indie guys, because I always feel like they're the hidden gems. They're the guys that are making things that are incredible, in some ways far superior than a lot of mainstream stuff too. So, when I hear you say that, that to me is the epitome of what a true, not necessarily a film lover, but a true filmmaker how would want to go about it. Where we didn't know what to do, but we did what we could and we made the best of it. We learned from that, and then we did better the next time around, and we stuck with it. And then the work clearly has gotten better along the years. So that to me is extremely important, which is why I gravitate to guys who's been at it for a while that no one's ever heard of, because I don't know, for one reason or another. It could be for the fact that their films aren't as well known because in one particular area, but they're known in other areas. So, when as you're going through this here now, I'm curious for you. I understand that you want to make movies, and eventually this is what you want to do on a full-time basis. But when you're doing this here, though, um, did you ever have that preconceived notion of like, I want to do films because of the fame and glory, or was it really just purely for the passion of filmmaking, not considering what the monetary rewards are going to be if it becomes successful? Like, because knowing most films don't always come out as successful on the first drop. So understanding that, like, did you have that preconceived notion behind that, or were you just fully aware that that's not what I want? I want to do this here, and whatever comes out of it, I hope for the best.
Yeah, I think if I was to do it for the fame and glory, I wouldn't have gotten into editing. It's one of those weird things that, like, even at film festivals, like they'll have the writing award, they'll have a cinematography award, and they won't have an editing award. And I'm like, there's only one person on the entire cast that spent more time with this movie than anybody else, and it was
Mhm.
the editor. And a lot of times they go unrecognized, and I take it as a great deal of pride when the movie wins that best film, right? But my name isn't attached to that award,
Right.
but it's like, okay, cool, I did my job, it won best film. I put the pieces together that everybody loved. And I think to get into filmmaking, like, there's only a handful of people who are doing it at such a high level that they're
Right.
making an incredible amount of money.
Right.
Eventually, I would love to get there. Um, but you have to love what you do
Right.
in order to get there, right? I think it's a rare instance that you just get to pop up there with the fame and the glory, right? There's a lot of time in the trenches spent, and like, if you don't love it, you could easily do something else for a lot more money. You can go be a salesman, and do that. But if you love telling stories, there's a passion behind telling stories. And I grew up, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. And one of the things that we loved doing together was watching movies. And we watched a lot of movies. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways, like being able to drown myself into a story like that um, allows me to basically kind of relive some of those moments that I had with my grandfather. Um, we watched a lot of movies like cable, like movies on cable and stuff like that, but we were
Yeah.
really into like Star Wars and movies that, that are super iconic,
Right.
like today. And it's like, man, I think if I ever had a goal would be to, I mean, I have a lot of goals, but you know what I mean? If, if
Okay.
I, if I had a goal when it came to like making a certain type of movie, like the fame, the glory, whatever, it's not about like the fame and the glory, but I want to make a movie that transcends generations, right?
Mm,
That
okay.
that people are still talking about 20, 30 years from now. And those movies, they still happen today.
Yeah.
Like with Elf or with
Yeah.
Jurassic Park, or movies that just completely blow our mind, and even some movies that were made for peanuts, for less than what we make our micro budget movies for. They are still talked about. You got like Napoleon Dynamite and
Yeah.
Paranormal Activities and those types of movies, and they kind of transcend generations.
Yeah.
And that's in the way that those happen. I mean, you know how Jurassic Park, obviously that one was destined to transcend generations because nobody had ever done a dinosaur movie like that before. And
And when you have
it
Spielberg
just
behind the
literally
camera,
sparked.
yeah, it'll definitely transcend.
Yeah, yeah, but when you make a silly movie like Napoleon Dynamite, right? It's like, how did that just take over an entire
Yeah.
culture? Or like just those types of, like a Squid Games, you know what I mean? Just took
Hmm.
over an entire culture. And those are the types of movies that we're going to be talking about years and years and years down the road. Um, like, man, how did they capture that lightning in a bottle? And I believe that's where I want to get to as a filmmaker, something that I want to kind of figure out, like, how do you tell the stories that people enjoy, and that
Yeah.
that basically affects or influences them. Yeah.
You mentioned about, Cinderella being that one film that you go back and watch because you connect with that story so well. But is there, aside from that film, is there one movie that I'm not saying you put it in such a high pedestal, but that you look at and you say, you know what, this is the film to me that is the example of like that transcends everything, that can reach everybody, at least for the most part. Like, what's that one film for you that comes to mind that you look in that regard for what you just explained about transcending here?
Yeah. um for me, I think it would have to be like the original Jurassic Park. like,
Mm,
like it's so crazy because it wasn't just the story, but it was the time in which the story came out,
right.
and the way that they were able to push the boundaries that set a platform for basically guys like me to be able to, um, almost almost 30 years later, be able to do the same type of CG on my home computer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, those guys, those guys paved a way with an idea. I mean, think about it. A guy created dinosaurs for an amusement park. How crazy of an idea is that,
Yeah.
right? But at a time where, and maybe it was just because it was me, and I was, when did that one come out? I was
93.
probably like 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah, it came out. Yeah, I
93.
was.
I was 8 years old, just coming on 9.
Yeah.
And that was like the ideal time for a guy like me to really get into dinosaurs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like my school was teaching dinosaurs and stuff like that. That was great. But when I saw them for real in Jurassic Park, I was like, I want some dinosaur toys. You know what I mean? Like it was just crazy. And like I wanted to go to Jurassic Park, and I wanted to live those moments. And like even at like 9 years old, I was like, what would I do in this situation when this, Tyrannosaurus Rex came after me. And what's cool is, like, they bring in the characters that were at such a young age. And I think what also helped that story is they had characters in there that were not just the heroes, but they were like the heroes for almost every age group. You had the older man who created the park with all the money, right?
Mm,
And then you had the middle-aged
interesting.
you know uh, guys there that were basically solving all the problems. And then you had the kids who were going through all of this and outsmarting a raptor, in the kitchen. And like, there was just something there for everybody when you watch it, that like it still speaks to us today. Like, maybe I don't relate anymore to the kids that were hiding in the kitchen, but I
Mhm.
can relate a lot more to Dr. Alan Grant and like and those types of guys. So it's I really think that movie, I don't know, captured lightning in a bottle with that one.
I think I'm really curious now because I was telling before about how I'm very intrigued with this idea of what you want to do with this action film, and you kind of give some like idea how you want to approach as far as the action is concerned. But hearing you point that out, as far as those little details about how it appeals to everyone, not because of the story, but also because of the characters. You have an old man, the middle aged group, and the kids, and there's different facets of our personalities when it comes to that. As many times as I've seen the movie, I'll be honest with you, I'd never noticed that as many times as I've seen it. So the fact that you actually pointed that out to me showcases that you are focusing on some of the more finer details when it comes to characters. That I'm very curious about how you're going to put that into your film when it comes to the not necessarily just with the action, but just the overall narrative in itself. I'm really curious to see how that's going to how it's going to come out here because the way you explained that to me, it was it was obvious, but I'm surprised I never noticed it. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that with how you're able to do that, I'm sure other people notice it because they're smarter than me, of course. But I'm sure if when you point that out and you translate that into a narrative, I'm really curious to see how that's going to play out, considering what you're going to go with here. Well, I was going to ask you one other thing here about with your background. You were born and raised in Texas, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so are born and raised in Dallas or outside of Dallas?
In Dallas.
Dallas. Okay, so
Mhm.
since the time you've been growing up in Dallas and seeing how things have changed a lot throughout the years, especially when it comes to filmmaking, I've noticed more so now that the indie filmmaking community in Dallas is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. From my perspective, I'm not sure how you see it on your end as far as how that's what it was like out there for you growing up into where things are now for you. So from your perspective there, how have you seen the industry change in terms of filmmaking, especially with the indie community in the Dallas area or in Texas in general for you?
Yeah, it's definitely growing, and I would like to attribute and maybe some of it to the mass exodus that's happening in California right now. There's just,
Yeah,
if you live in Texas, you know that there's a lot of people who are moving from California to Texas.
yeah.
And a lot of those people make movies, and a lot of people are in entertainment in various different facets. And so the opportunities here are growing, but it's also a lot cheaper to make a movie here in Texas. So you'll see even people from LA bring their production. Next month, I'm working. Unfortunately, not working on Brett's film next month, but next month I'm working on another Western. These guys are coming from LA to film at a Western town, and I'm able to work on that with these guys. But you'll see, I think, more opportunities to film in Texas, and
Mhm.
then there's just like this crazy passion for movie making here that it just kind of generated, through a lot of local um, um, opportunities, like uh, there's little speed festivals and competition festivals and things like that. And then once you do a couple of those, you network with a few people, and then you get all these opportunities. But there's also like this growing um, Christian film opportunities that's
Mhm.
happening here in Dallas with Capernaum Studios. And then if you're familiar with The Chosen, the Bible series that
I've heard of that
um,
show. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that films here in DFW as well.
Okay.
And like there's just a lot of opportunities. Like a lot of the guys that were working on that, they They actually filmed. I don't know if you're familiar with the show, with the movie Hillary's America. It was Dinesh D'Souza's movie that he put out when Donald Trump was running for president.
Yeah. I remember that movie.
Yeah, they filmed a lot of the reenactment stuff. The past, they filmed it on my grandmother's property down the street. So
Interesting.
it was just really, really cool to see, like, all those people, even there. Most of them were local. They all had local film houses, and they were all working together to make this amazing film. And yeah, it's the opportunities are constantly growing here in Texas, and I think it's gonna get even bigger.
Well, it's I'm not sure if you're able to answer, sir. But when I was talking to Brett about um, filming in Texas, one of the things he pointed out, which I've heard as well too from other people, that there really isn't a lot of tax incentive in Texas as far as productions are concerned. But if there is, they're going to give it to in this case a show like 1883, I think so was a show that was shot out
Yeah.
there. So they're going to give all the money to those guys because that's obviously bigger production, bigger name, and so on and so forth. But for indie filmmakers, they're really relying on investors and self budgeting, of course. So, from
Mhm.
your perspective, are you confident about that changing along the way, where there's going to be more tax incentive that's going to be helpful for other productions that are in house, or do you think there's still a long way to go, considering how the game is played out there, at least right now for Texas?
I, I I think there's still a long way to go. I don't know if, I mean, obviously that's all like political, right?
Right.
I don't know if that's like on at the top of their list right now of things that they
Mm,
need to get fixed. Um, but the the beauty with filming in Texas may not be for the tax incentives, but if you think about having to rent a property and get permits to film in different locations like in LA or other places like that, they get really, really expensive. And in Texas, there's a lot of opportunities to film at a lot of locations at fractions of that price, and sometimes even free. And so that's what allows Texas, I believe, to grow when it comes to making movies. Now, and obviously, if you're doing a movie like 1883 and you gotta convert downtown Fort Worth into an 1800s town, yeah, that's going to cost you a lot of money to film in that location. Shut the city down for like a week. But if you got like a friend who owns like a pasture with a barn out there, and you want to make a movie about some guy who's tied up in the barn and trying to escape or whatever, you just got to make a phone call and be like, hey, can I film on your property? Yeah, I've got like $100 a day. I'd love to I'd love to credit you in the movie or whatever. And a lot of people are just, they're super open to it. And that's different than a lot of places.
So, for you, with the way that things are going for you right now, are you keeping Texas or listening to Dallas as your home base, or do you eventually see down the line, if things start to move along the way as far as directing is concerned, where more opportunities may come around? Do you see
Mhm.
yourself potentially moving out of the state to go where more of the work is located for you, if the opportunity were to present itself that way, or are you making Dallas your home base pretty much for the rest of your life?
I mean, if opportunities did arise where I needed to go somewhere else, that would be a situation that my wife and I would have to discuss. But I think I'm blessed, and I'm in a position where even when I talk to filmmakers and work with filmmakers, I mean, editing is nice. You mail me a hard drive, boom, I can be wherever I need to be, right? That's the beauty of editing, and I
Mhm.
can I can be in Montana, right? It doesn't even matter. But I talk with other filmmakers in like different, a lot of them out in LA, a lot of them in Washington, and most of them are like, man, I wish that I can just move to Texas. Like it just seems like so much better there. So I have a feeling, that in about 5 years, you're going to see a lot more of those LA based film houses make their way to DFW or to Texas in general. There's just a lot more opportunity.
So when you're looking, I mean, have you gone through the entire state of Texas, getting to know the state, where you understand where how certain areas have this type of terrain that certain film may look for, that you're looking out for yourself? They say, you know what, maybe someone down the line I'm going to be doing a film and I'm going to shoot it up there. And since I know the industry here, I know how to bypass certain things that most other people may have trouble getting through. So is there do you have that kind of level of confidence where that's going to be something that you're looking into down the line when it comes to filmmaking when you're in Texas?
So that's the I guess the beauty of being previously in a touring music, in a touring rock band is
Right.
I know just about everything there, like all the facets of Texas, and then
Okay.
all the surrounding states as well. So yeah, there's a lot of amazing terrain out there, and a lot of opportunities to shoot at that amazing terrain. I think they even just opened it up, if I'm not mistaken, national parks, as long as you're not putting a tripod down and you don't have a crew over a certain amount of size, you can film there without a permit.
Mm,
This it's and Texas has some of the most amazing national parks. Now that's not state parks, that's national parks. So you have to kind of do your research and make sure you're in the right location at the right time. State parks, you do have to get a permit. But
mm,
honestly, like getting permits at for some of these locations is a lot cheaper than in all the others, just because there's not a whole lot of competition. There's not a whole lot of people knocking down the door like, hey, I want to film this week or I want to film that week, and then they have to raise their prices because they're trying to open it up for the tourists who need to come in. So they're trying to like shy away from having other productions shutting down the place. But they're having people come up to them like maybe once a month or maybe once or twice a year. It's not that big of a deal.
So well, earlier you talked about you were in a band and you were touring on a full time basis. Seeing the industry on that perspective, and I know you mentioned you were in a Christian band, but I'm curious about um, seeing how the industry worked from the music aspect of it here. Are there any major differences for you that well, and I want to say difference, but anything you take away from that experience as far as the road life is concerned, and the amount of work that's involved in touring and whatnot, that you see some similarities when it comes to films?
Yeah, I mean, whether you're a musician or you're making movies, it all boils down to telling stories. You know, if you're writing a song, you're telling a story.
Mhm.
You're making a movie, you're telling a story. And I think the better you get at telling stories, I like to think of it this way. I believe the things that linger after we die are the stories we tell. You know, they're
Mhm.
the ones that get passed down to our kids, and then our kids pass those down to their kids. And the most honorable thing that we can do in this life is to tell stories, and whether they're fictional or they're real stories or whatever, they're um, it's what we as a humanity, enjoys. And so yeah, there's a lot of similarities. What is nice, I mean, there are times where I'll have to go and I have to be on set and I have to stay overnight, and yeah, that feels like I'm touring or whatever. But what's nice is filming, a little bit more locally. um, I can come home at night and be with my wife and kids and things like that. Whereas on tour, it was I wasn't married when I was on tour, thank the Lord, but um, there was a lot of missing birthdays and missing holidays, and
Yeah.
just you know uh, out and about. And usually on film sets, you have a little bit more control over that.
Do you
So
prefer, the music career, or are you leaning more, feeling more content with the movie side of it here? Because you mentioned before you have more control in certain respects when it comes to your schedule, but being on the road, I mean, are there anything about it you miss, or having that experience you realize, you know what, I've had my fun. It was fun while I was there, while it lasted, but this is what I'd rather stick with this and not go back to that. Like, what's your perception on that now?
yeah, no, I would rather do movies. I'll be honest
Okay.
with you. The one thing that I will say that I do miss from being in a band is the touring aspect. I just love to travel. I
Okay.
love the the long drives. Like we would go anywhere from LA up to Columbus, Ohio, all the way over to the East Coast. And like we traveled all over the place, and just those long drives, being able to see the country, um, it was so much. It was a valuable experience, I believe, to go through. But it's not something that um, I mean, it's not something I would want to do again if I could choose. And I mean, I have chose.
Yeah, yeah,
I would definitely do movies. Um, it's especially now that I've got kids and all that stuff. And for me in music, the money just wasn't there. It was we were trying to be a Christian rock band at a time when Christian rock was falling off a cliff, and
mhm.
even the local station was closing down at the same time we were trying to ramp everything up, and it was like, you know, what are we doing? We had to make
Yeah,
a
yeah.
choice. And so uh, I love the entertainment industry. So being able to find my place in making movies, I think is definitely something that I'm glad I was able to do.
Do you still play music on your own from time to time, or you get it with a group with the guys who kind of play whenever you have free time to do that? Like, how do you still have the time for that?
Yeah, we did a reunion show actually a couple months ago, and
Okay.
we rehearsed so hard I lost my voice. And so we played in front of, I don't even remember how many people were there. It was like 100 or something like that. But
Mhm.
um, I couldn't sing. But luckily, they all knew our songs, and so I just backed away from the mic and was like, "You guys sing it." You know what I mean? And, it was great, and it was a fun experience. And I have my buddies, like we still keep up with each other, and they want to play music
Right.
as often as they possibly can. And every now and then I'll do like a country show and do some covers and stuff like that. But um, as far as as far as playing on the regular, not really.
Did you when you went well apart from the fact you lost your voice, but when you were on stage playing though, did you get that feeling like, wow, this is I've missed this, or was it more like it was fun, but I'm glad I'm doing this instead?
No, I definitely missed it. There's
Okay.
there's something like when you're in the groove and you're in the music, like there's just something special about that moment, right? It's different. It's like nothing else you would ever be able to experience. Especially like when the when the crowd is in it as well. It's uh there's just, I don't know, it's like I nothing else gives you that experience. Like even when you make a movie and you go and watch it in the theater with the crowd, right? It's not the
Mhm.
same. um but that's basically that's the only thing that I would say that I missed is being able to see um see the crowd and interact with them.
So if an opportunity were to come up now, let's say if hey, we got a gig for you guys to play, we'll give you X amount. It's going to be at this location in this crowd capacity. Would you take up on that opportunity, take up on that chance to do it, or do you have to like prepare yourself and say, I don't know, have to, to get yourself into that mood for you to be able to do that?
No, I would definitely do it.
Okay.
And I've never had any issues with being able to just play. I mean, and I would play every now and then at the church that I would go to,
Mm.
and things like that as well. So
Okay. So now that you have like gone through, both sides of the industry as far as music and film is concerned, for you personally, what's like the biggest takeaway that you've gotten from seeing both sides of the coin when it comes to the hardships of a musician, and the highs and the lows, and then the hardships of a filmmaker, seeing the highs and the lows with that as well too. Um, is there something you take away from that that has given you a perspective about how you look at yourself now from when you were then, or anything that has changed along the way for you that you may have not considered before thinking about that now you are focusing more on as a result of your experiences in both sides of the industry?
right, yeah. I think what it's taught me coming from being a musician to now a filmmaker is everything has a rhythm. Um, even if it's obviously music has a rhythm, right? You get
Mhm.
your drums, you get your guitars and all that stuff, but a film has a rhythm, and the way that the actors deliver things, and the way that, if you want this scene to be fast or slow or whatever, everything has an ebb and a flow to it. And I think that's one of the biggest similarities between them both. I mean, music is such a key element in movie making as well. I've in some of the short films that I did, I was able to, write some of the pieces that go into the film, which is great. But the way that the music moves, like if if you watch a rough cut of a film, it my wife will come in, she'll watch them every now and then. She'll be like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, like this is boring. Like it's just two people talking, or like, what's going on here? I don't fully understand it. And then I'm like, hang on, wait a second. Let me drop in the soundtrack real quick. Now let's watch the movie. She'd be like, wow, that was powerful. It's so crazy how like the music changes the movie. You know, I always go back to like our most iconic, like if you want to think of like Jaws, right? Just the just the little two notes or whatever. Like imagine that, those moments, you just take the music out.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not scary. It's a fish in the water, but the
teeth.
music, but the music sets the mood. And I think I value, being able to understand not only how to make music, but also how to have music drive the mood and drive the moment in the story.
Would you ever consider scoring if given the opportunity?
I yes and no. Like I always have like scores in my head. What's nice is when I do my short films, I have my keyboardist for my band. He's really, really good at that stuff. And so I'll just take my phone and sit at the piano and I'll play out what I want him to do, and then send it over to him, and he'll transform it into something way better than I even could imagine. So it's nice to be able to work in that facet, to be able to work with somebody who can translate what I want into something a little bit more cinematic.
So kind of like for you, it'd be like just giving an idea for them to work on, and you let them do their thing. That's how you prefer it in that regard. Okay.
I don't mind writing the piece and then
Right.
and then also driving it. So like when they'll send it back and be like, I don't like the strings here, or I don't like the instrument that you chose for this, or whatever. Let's try cello, or let's try solo violin or something. I like to be able to pass it off, especially if you think like as an editor, like there's only so many hats I can wear, before like you get to a point of diminishing returns. Like if I learn how to score, but I'm also doing VFX and I'm also editing. I think there comes a point in the filmmaking process where if the more people who are involved in it, it makes it so much better, because it's people are hitting it from different perspectives, and you get this mesh of beautiful ideas that make a story just work. And if it was only told from one perspective, I think you get a little bit of a narrow-minded movie that, I mean, and maybe it's worked for some people in the past, but it doesn't work on the grand scheme of things. They work, most movies are working with thousands and thousands of people and giving their perspectives on things. And that's what makes a story so polished and so beautiful.
For you, what would be the thing that you dread the most about the overall filmmaking process? Like when I talked to Brett, he had said that he kind of has a love-hate relationship with making films, where he loves the results, but it seems like the work is what he hates the most. But for you, do you have something similar to that, or are you one of those people that you understand the hard work, and it can be very stressful, but you love the process? Like what's your perspective of like how as far as that relationship is concerned with filmmaking?
Yeah, so where Brett's coming from, because I actually did watch that interview. That was a good interview.
Oh, thanks.
Where Brett's coming from is like he's not as involved in the post-production process of it all as I am, but he is involved in the pre-production process. And I can tell you from experience, that part of the work is no fun. Like all the paperwork, all the contracts you got to sign, you got to make the phone calls with the actors, and then all of a sudden the week before, the actor's like, I got COVID, I can't make it on set, and now you got to find another actor. Like those types of things would drive me absolutely insane. But being able to take a footage, take a series of clips that were shot and go into post-production and basically do a series of problem solving, I could do that. That to me is fun. but yeah, I can see where he's coming from when it's like, yeah, this love-hate relationship. But that's why I think that's why Tiffany is so important, because she takes
Yeah.
a lot of that from him so he can actually focus on the story. And but yeah, in pre-production, you you have to have like, you have to be a special kind of person to love pre-production. And there's a lot of people, especially in DFW, has probably some of the best producers. You know, if you guys are listening out there, whoever's listening to this, there's some really amazing producers in Texas, and they just have this ability to bring people together and communicate and get all the paperwork done in the right proper fashion. And I'm not organized like that. I just I couldn't do it.
Yeah, that was a funny thing about learning when it comes to, because like I said, I always point out about how filmmaking, the art form it's one thing, but you have all these other things that are tacked on that most people don't really consider about what's involved when making a movie. And I think the biggest hurdles that people don't understand is the the legalities behind it, the preparation for not just the shots but the preparation for the actor, and then getting the actor to agree to it, and then if they agree to it, they're not doing their bit to prepare for it. Like there's a lot of different layers that's involved with that. And I think when I look at film now, and I think I said it before in the interview with Brett, where I would look at a film, and I when I was younger I used to be like, this movie sucks, and I just kind of give it all sorts of criticism. But then as the years have gone by, not that I've ever made a film before, but I understand the hard work that goes behind it. So if I look at a movie and I think, why did that movie not turn out as well? And when you learn about it, oh well, the person had great intentions, but A, B, and C happened, therefore all these things fell through. So it wasn't their fault, but they're taking the blame for it because their name's on the marquee. Therefore, they're the ones taking the hit. So it's a very unfair aspect about how people perceive movies, and they kind of write it off when they don't really consider the amount of work that's involved. Even if it's a movie that I don't like, but I understand, okay, they put in their effort here. So, for you, when you're making a film, look, making your short films, and you mentioned before you have received awards for that, but when you're looking at making a feature film, considering the criticisms that will come with it, whether it be good, bad, some more than others, like, are you prepared for that as well too, about what that experience is gonna be like? And I'm imagining you watching Brett, reading his reviews, or seeing what the reaction is for his films. Are you listening? Are you aware of what to be prepared for, to understand the you know the amount of what's the word? I guess I don't have the proper word for it, but just preparing for what's going to come with that is what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say.
yeah. I believe when it comes to art, everything is subjective. Now,
Right.
there are moments when you watch a movie and you're like, "Oh man, that was bad."
Yeah.
And there are people who are literally, I mean, that's just out there. People cut corners. They don't do things right. It happens, right? Or they just didn't have the budget and they only have a week to make the movie, right? So you gotta, I guess, without knowing the full story, it's really hard to be overly critical. Now, I have seen movies where I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's so many issues. Like I watched a movie recently with Bruce Willis, and a lot of people wouldn't know this, but I'm like, first of all, the story it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Second of all, when they shot it, there's so much infrared pollution, and there's nothing you can do about that. It's just everything was just over, like the browns were just completely desaturated, or not the browns, but the blacks were just completely desaturated. And that's like one of those technical things that I have a curse of knowledge when I'm like, because I know how cameras work, and I'm like, that was not shot right. Like the angles were bad. Like half of the stuff is out of focus. Like why did you choose that angle over that? And yeah, you'll get to a point where like you're overly critical, but you got to think it's always important as a filmmaker, as a director, because I can almost bet that watching a movie like that we don't like, there's a point in which the director, unless he's overly defending it, but a lot of times there's a point in which the director is like, you know what, I'm not gonna like that. But there's a series of issues that start from the writing process that, if aren't taken care of in the beginning, translate to something even big and or worse when you get done with the edit. And I think if you take care of the issues in the beginning before you even push the record button, and that a lot of that comes with having the right team, having, like we were talking about earlier, people who buy into what you're doing,
Right.
who just completely understand the process. Because you'll see movies where you're like, man, how did they make that decision on set? And a lot of times it's because, maybe the sound guy was having a bad day, and then him and the director were just kind of going at it, and the sound guy was like, you know what, whatever, y'all figure it out, and I'm off set. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that happens, especially in micro budget filmmaking, because it's a half passion project and a half paid project. So you have to kind of like work with everybody and make sure everybody is happy and make sure everybody believes in you. And I can only imagine that some of these smaller projects, they have that. But I'm being a musician and like having songs on the radio and all that stuff, I'm completely aware of the criticism. And I know that like whatever I make isn't going to be for everybody. There are movies out there that my friends are like, oh, this is the greatest movie that came out in 2021. And I watch it and I'm like, I couldn't even get past 15 minutes. Like I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, why do you love this movie? I don't get it. And but at the same time, I'll watch a movie and that same friend will be like, that movie was garbage. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That movie was the greatest movie that's come out in the past 5 years, and it's all subjective, and if you try to make a movie for everybody, you're going to end up making a movie for nobody. I think you have to think, okay, how do I want to tell a story that I love? Because there's a lot of people out there like me. And there are a lot of people out there who are going to love the way that I tell stories. And there's always going to be the critics. And, you just read a YouTube comment section, there's people who just want to be trolls, so, you just got to take the good with the bad. And I think at the end of the day, you really have to think, like, did this movie or did this story affect somebody? Did it make them think a little bit about their life and what they're going through? And if you did that, then you did a great job. That's what we're here for, to tell stories. And honestly, the people who hate and give the nasty comments and things like that, they watched the movie. They knew exactly what was going on. They heard the story. It affected them in some way. It may not have been the way that you anticipated, but it affected them, and the difference between the people leaving the comments and the people making the movies are there's only a few people that get to make movies, and we're the privileged few that get an opportunity to tell stories that are going to be around for
a while. It's funny because we're talking about criticism here. As of this recording, I did a review for a movie. I won't say which one it is, but if you look at the channel, you'll probably figure it out. But I mean, if the way I see it for myself when it comes to criticism, at least in this capacity here, if it's a mainstream movie, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, they have the funds, they have the resources. There's a certain level of awareness that is going to be brought to the film where, some things are going to be pointed out that are going to be good and bad. And that's just the name of the game. When it comes to indie films, I'm a little less, I don't necessarily like to fall into that category of like, well, I'm going to criticize a film and then say what I think about it, especially if it's a movie that is, they worked very hard on. And if I don't like it, I have the tendency to not want to review it because I don't want to say something about the film that I didn't like, and then someone has a preconceived. See, all indie films are like this. That's not true. It's just that this film was like that for me, but you may watch and realize, hey, it's actually a good movie. But like you said, it's subjective. So when I did a review for a movie, and I was dreading it because I didn't want to review the film because I didn't like the movie. And but but how I decided to take on it for myself was that, listen, it's not for me. I didn't care for this, didn't care for that. Didn't didn't understand what they're going for. I watched it again. I understood it a little bit better, but it still wasn't for me. You may like it, so you check it out. When I did my rating, I said this is a rating for me, but you may watch and say it's amazing. So I try to give that disclaimer because I think that's the best way to go about it. Because one thing I don't appreciate when it comes to critics is that this movie is flat out garbage. That's like a big, a big brush to just kind of to say that, because I don't think it's a fair way to assess in a
Yeah.
movie. If you say I didn't like the film, well, why not? Because it sucks. Why did it suck? It was boring. Well, why was it boring? The actors were terrible. Like, you are really not helping out with the situation here.
Right,
So,
right.
it's a very, 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 I have a problem with it, but I don't think about it too much, because the way I see it is that if they are taking the time, as you said, to shit on a movie, the way I see it is, well, you saw the film, so if anything, you've done them a service by putting the time to check it out,
Mhm.
and all you've done is create more awareness by saying this about it. So someone else is going to want to eventually check it out too, whether they like it or not. It's going to be up to them. But in reality, your help, any promotion is good promotion, is the way I see it. So,
Right.
but I want to just say one thing here about you here, Jeff, is that I was really curious to hear from someone's perspective on, not necessarily from the director side of it, but really from the editor, in this case now VFX and now cinematography. And I never really had the opportunity to speak with someone in that perspective there, to kind of give their insight, and then also give them their perspective about how they want to approach things along the way too. So I was very happy that you replied back and said that you wanted to have a sit down and converse with me. So I do appreciate you taking the time to speak to me on here. Um, and I'm really looking forward to with what you're working on right now, with, as you kind of touched upon before, with this new film that you're hoping to get off the ground real soon. Because hearing the way you talk and hearing the way that you're focusing on some of the more finer details, to me it's clearly obvious you're also a very good storyteller too, because you're focusing on areas that I think that are important to highlight, and then bring that into a form of a narrative, and also pointing out the other details that also will make the story very compelling for the audience to focus on, as far as the character and the stories and the motivation, so on and so forth. So I'm very curious to see
Right.
how that's going to come to fruition there. And I really do hope it comes down the line real soon. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to kind of close off here with on your end, as far as like what we've touched upon before, or anything else you want to highlight before we sign off here, for anyone to be in a lookout for you, as far as any upcoming projects that you were able to bring awareness on here on your end.
Um, I mean, no, I mean, just definitely be on the lookout for Bull Shark when it comes out.
Yeah.
I think Meteor's now on the shelf.
Yeah.
Operation Overlord just got released.
Yeah.
We've got a handful of stuff coming out. That's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, you always got to keep in mind when you're watching these movies is they're made for maybe like 1% of what the budgets you're seeing, like the big ones you see in the theaters, or even like the ones that are propped up on Netflix. They're made for about 1% of that budget. So you gotta take into account, like, when you're watching the end credits at the end, like, man, that's a smaller crew
Yeah.
than some of these other guys get to work on. And you have to appreciate the amount of work that went into basically a group of guys who, as I said earlier, bit off more than they can chew to tell a story that wouldn't get told otherwise, and it would just sit on a shelf and on a thick stack of papers, and maybe sent off to a studio somewhere that would just get thrown in a bin in a warehouse. But these stories are actually getting told, and it's a privilege to be able to tell them. So definitely, when you're watching them, keep that in mind, that the budget is ultra limited, the time on set is ultra limited, but we still get to tell stories that people get to enjoy.